Hi, I'm the Octopus Lady. You're watching Alien Ocean, and in the spirit of Halloween, let's talk about vampire squid today, shall we? Or Vampyroteuthis infernalis, the vampire squid from hell. No, seriously, that's what its scientific name means. Teuthis means squid, infernalis means hell, vampiro means vampire. Put that all together and you got the vampire squid from hell. And one scientist back in 1926 described them as, quote, a very small but terrible octopus, black as night, with ivory white jaws and blood red eyes. So spooky. Let's talk about just how spooky these squids are. Before we start though, I just want to mention that things are going to look a little bit different in this video. Almost all photos and footage I can find of vampire squid are owned by private companies, which from my understanding meant I ran the risk of my video getting copyright claimed if I used any of them. But my good friend Bryan, who is a professional storyboard artist and has worked at a bunch of big name animation studios, and actually designed my YouTube avatar way back in the day, drew a ton of the visuals for this episode so I could make this video, which was so awesome of him. Bryan G. Mann? More like Bryan the Man. Completely unrelated, feel free to sign up for my Patreon so that someday I could maybe, possibly, potentially hire a professional storyboard artist who's worked at a bunch of big name animation studios to come work for me full-time or something, I don't know. Anyway, vampire squid are part of the class Cephalopoda, making them unsurprisingly related to every single incredible creature to ever exist on this planet, but surprisingly, they're apparently not actually squid. They're supposedly more closely related to octopuses than they are to squid, but they're not really either of them. They're sort of their own thing. I've seen some researchers just call them Vampyroteuthis, like that's their common name, but that's still calling them squid. Whatever, I'm still gonna call them vampire squid because I don't know what else to call them. Also interestingly, the vampire squid is the only living member of their order, Vampyromorpha or Vampyromorphida. I've seen it spelled both ways and I'm not sure which one is correct. All other members of this order are dead. Yeah, they all went extinct like forever ago. Oh god, did you not know this? Oh my god, oh no, I'm so sorry, I didn't know. Turn off the camera. Oh no, please don't cry. Stop filming. Cut the... Anyway, vampire squids have been around for at least 162 million years, which means, for context, they got to enjoy about 12 million years of relative silence with all these other organisms before pistol shrimp showed up and started making a ruckus. Also, I've heard vampire squid be described as a living fossil, meaning they're an organism that hasn't changed at all in a really long time, whatever a really long time means. But living fossils aren't technically a thing. Just because something appears to have not changed a lot in a really long time doesn't mean it's the same as it was millions of years ago. This isn't something I'm going to get into here, but I just watched this video recently and it was really interesting, so if you want to learn more about how living fossils don't really exist, I suggest you check it out. Vampire squid are found all over the world in tropical and temperate oceans, but you won't find them in the shallows, unfortunately. They are a deep-sea squid, living anywhere from 600 meters to 900 meters below, but they have been found as deep as 3,300 meters below, which means that they often, but not always, reside in oxygen minimum zones, which are areas of the ocean where oxygen saturation is extremely low, like below 7%. They're also sometimes called shadow zones, which I thought sounded really cool. There are basically two primary reasons why OMZs occur, one physical and one biological. The physical reason is just there are areas of the ocean where there isn't a lot of circulation. Like, okay, there are these things called gyres that are like, this is a whole thing, by the way, but like they move the water in the ocean around in giant circles, sorta, which keeps the water oxygenated, but there are nooks and crannies that get missed, like here and here, so the water in those places basically stagnates and you get an OMZ. I just want to be clear though, the water at the surface of these areas of the ocean always stays oxygenated because it's in direct contact with the air, but if you start to dive down, you're way more likely to run into an OMZ here than like here. The second reason, the biological one, is going to sound familiar if you've watched my previous videos about plankton like dinoflagellates and diatoms. These phytoplankton will bloom in great numbers, and if they all don't get eaten by other organisms, will die and sink to the bottom of the ocean. As they sink, bacteria will decompose them, which is a process that requires oxygen. And since there is no living phytoplankton to replenish the oxygen that's being used up by the bacteria, boom, we got an oxygen minimum zone. And this is where vampire squid often like to call home, which means they are an extremophile! Dun-na, dun-dun-na, dun-dun-na, dun-na, dun-dun-na, Squids on parade! No, but okay, extremophiles are real things. They are organisms that live in what are legitimately called extreme environments, which are environments that are just very difficult to live in, because maybe the temperature is really high, or it's really, really acidic, or there isn't a ton of oxygen around. The main benefit of living in the OMZ is that it's basically safe. There aren't a ton of predators in this area of the ocean, and even if one wandered into it, it wouldn't be able to stick around for very long. Vampire squid have developed all sorts of adaptations to live comfortably in OMZs, including having an absurdly low metabolism. One vampire squid was recorded at consuming only 0.02 micromoles of oxygen per gram of body weight per hour, which I'm not gonna really explain what that means, but I did some math, and it might not be correct. Here's my work. Pause to read if you're a nerd and want to double check it. But for comparison, I calculated that humans consume 18 micromoles of oxygen per gram of body weight per hour, which is 900 times more than the vampire squid, meaning basically that vampire squid don't breathe a lot. Like, they really don't need a lot of oxygen to survive. They also have a protein in their blood that has a very high affinity for oxygen, much higher than similar proteins found in other cephalopods, and they're absolute pros at maintaining neutral buoyancy, which means they don't have to waste a lot of energy and therefore oxygen trying to prevent themselves from sinking down too much or floating up too much. But despite living in a pretty predator-free place, vampire squid still have some pretty wild defense mechanisms, which makes sense. They barely breathe, and they also have super weak musculature, so they can't really run away from a predator like a lot of other animals do. Some of the first imagery I ever saw of the vampire squid was in a documentary showing footage of it doing this, and I very distinctly remember the narrator saying that no one knew why it was doing this. This does expose all their cirri, or ciri, I'm still not sure how to pronounce this word, which are these spines that run the length of their arms. This is sort of just for show though, because these spines are actually really soft and squishy, but if you didn't know that, it can still be pretty intimidating to try to take a bite out of this. Quick side note, I thought for a long time that vampire squid only had ciri, whatever, on their arms, but it turns out that they do have suckers too, but only on the distal half of their arms, which is like the half that's furthest from their body. Another defense mechanism that vampire squid use is bioluminescence. They have organs called photophores, which are light-producing organs, two big ones at the base of their fins and one at the tip of each of their arms that light up bright blue, which explains another reason for this behavior, because if you look at them from this angle, they look like this, which makes them look like they have 10 glowing eyes, which can be really confusing for a predator. And vampire squid can constrict the muscles around their two big photophores, so it actually looks like they're getting smaller and smaller, making the vampire squid look like it's moving away when it's not. And then they finish this little bit of behavior off by doing a little somersault. So now the predator thinks the squid is really far away, but it's just like over there. Side note, I was extremely confused when I was researching this part of the video because for well over a decade, I thought these were their eyes. I thought their eyes glowed, but the papers I was reading about vampire squid didn't mention anything about their eyes being bioluminescent, and I thought I was going nuts. Like, clearly these are their eyes and they're glowing, so their eyes must be bioluminescent, so why is no one talking about that? But then Dr. Kat Bolstad of the AUT Squid Squad over on Twitter was very kind to take some time out of her day to explain to me that these are not the eyes of the vampire squid. These are the two big photophores at the base of their fins. Their eyes are down here somewhere, which means I fell for it. The point of these is to trick predators into thinking they're actual real eyes, and I fell for it. Hook, line, and sinker for literally over a decade. You sneaky little jerks. Anyway, their glowing arm tips can also serve as a sacrificial diversion. Like most cephalopods, vampire squid can grow back their arms if they get bitten off, but they can't grow back their head if that gets bitten off. So if a predator does want to take a bite out of a vampire squid, it's way more likely to be interested in biting the squid's arms, which would suck, but it probably wouldn't kill them. Also, unlike most cephalopods, vampire squid don't have any ink, but they do have this glowing mucus that they spit out from their arm tips. And when they sweep their arms up around their head, it sort of envelops the squid in this glowing cloud of goo, which again can be really weird and confusing for a predator. This mucus is also pretty sticky, so it could serve a burglar alarm purpose, which we've talked about on this channel before. Go check out my dinoflagellate videos if you haven't already. The glowing sticky goo would adhere to to the predator and light it up, making it a potential target for its own predators. So while it's trying to deal with that problem now, the vampire squid can get away. So if you've been low-grade obsessed with vampire squid for the majority of your adult life, you'll notice that they have these weird yellow strings that extend out from their body. These are the vampire squid's filaments, and we've talked about filaments in cephalopods before with the Magnapinna squid, but their filaments are a lot different from their filaments. For one, vampire squid only have a pair of them, and they keep them tucked up in little pockets between their first and second arms, which, I don't know, when I read that, I immediately thought of someone saying, "Hey, that's a cute cephalopod," and me responding with, "Thanks, it has pockets." Just dumb, that was stupid. They usually only extend one filament at a time for some reason, which can be up to 8 times their body length, and they're directly connected to the squid's brain, which is kind of a trip. The filaments also have a fairly large nerve that runs the entire length of them, and one whole side of them is covered in sensory cells. So their filaments are highly attuned to process sensory information, but we see them primarily being used for collecting food. So, some of you right now might be very excited to hear about what and how vampire squid eat, because with a name like that, surely they have piercing fangs hidden somewhere on their body, and they suck the blood out of whatever poor creature is doomed to cross its path. But I'm about to really disappoint you. Vampire squid are actually detritivores, and they're the only detritivore in all of Cephalopoda. And a detritivore is an organism that eats detritus, and detritus is a fancy way to say bits of rotting garbage. Not garbage, that's not entirely accurate, but it seems that their diet is primarily made up of marine snow, which sounds really pretty, but it's actually kind of gross. I've heard marine snow described diplomatically as organic particulate matter that drifts down from the surface waters, but it's mostly just particles of dead, decaying things and poop. And I will concede that vampire squids in captivity have eaten live food like brine shrimp, but when researchers have examined the stomach contents of vampire squid caught in the wild, it's a lot of marine snow. Like, it's a lot of marine snow. So, to my knowledge, we've only ever seen vampire squid eat in laboratory settings. Researchers have squirted a bunch of dead plankton on a vampire squid's extended filament, which all got stuck on these hairs that cover the filament. The vampire squid would immediately start coiling it up, pulling it through its arms, and wiping all the plankton onto its suckers, which would then produce a mucus that would wrap all the plankton up into a bolus. And then the bolus would get passed up to the vampire squid's mouth by way of the cirri, whatever, and the vampire squid would eat it. Their filaments might and most likely do serve other purposes besides just collecting food. Some researchers think it could also be a way to monitor for predators nearby, or maybe even living prey, but as usual, it's probably also for a bunch of reasons we don't know yet. But I gotta say, when I found out that vampire squid were detritivores, it kind of blew my mind because so many cephalopods are like these perfectly optimized top-tier predators, just like evolution's perfect killing machine, and I expected the same from the vampire squid, and they're not. They're the complete and polar opposite of that. Which makes sense. That totally makes sense. If you're going to make your home in a place like the oxygen minimum zone, there's definitely not going to be a lot of live prey around for you to eat, and even if there was, you aren't going to have a lot of energy to go after them, so eating marine snow makes perfect sense. But vampire squid honestly remind me a lot of Magnapinna squid, because everyone thinks there's some terrifying monster lurking in the depths below, but they're just kind of like harmless little footballs. They have barely any stamina, so they can't chase after you. They have super weak musculature, so even if they did somehow manage to grab you, it wouldn't be that hard to shake them off. The spines that run along their arms aren't sharp at all. They don't drink blood, they eat detritus, and I didn't mention this earlier, but they only get to be like a foot long. Little foot-long footballs, that's all they are. The only reason the vampire squid from hell has such a terrifying name is because dudes in the 1920s saw one and were like, "Oh heavens, I've got the vapors, what a terrifying creature. Surely this demon manifested from the darkest pits of the underworld." I don't know how people from the 1920s talked, but even though they might not be that terrifying, I find vampire squid to be utterly fascinating, and I hope that you did too. Happy Halloween! Thanks for watching another episode of Alien Ocean, and special thanks again to my friend Bryan Mann. Honestly, I thought I was never going to be able to make a video about vampire squid unless I was okay with, like, the BBC or whoever ganking all my ad revenue from it, like Nat Geo tried to do with my mantis shrimp video. But all of Bryan's hard work means I didn't have to worry about that. So if you enjoyed this video and want to support the work we do here on this channel, maybe sign up for our Patreon. You'll get early access to videos, some behind the scenes stuff, and or your name in the beautiful credits. And I finally figured out how Twitter works, so go follow me over there. And oh, and the hopefully interesting question of the day is, okay, even though it doesn't fit them at all, I love the name Vampyroteuthis infernalis for these guys. So my question is, if you could, would you change their name? And if so, what would you change it to? Leave your answer down in the comments. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe and all that. And until next time, this has been your friendly neighborhood octopus lady reminding you that you don't need to go into space to find aliens.